Let's talk about QuickBooks settings and mappings. For purposes of this discussion, we'll assume you already have a connected QuickBooks account. Here, we see a QuickBooks account that has already been connected to OwnerRez. We'll click on it to drill in. At the top, we see a summary of the connected QuickBooks account, along with a quick status and some global settings. The top three fields show the company ID, name, and email that QuickBooks has on file for this connected account. Below that, we see the status of the QuickBooks connection in OwnerRez and whether it is active or needs attention. If we click the Change button, we see some basic settings to control invoice creation and the mapping of rent line items. These settings will govern how this QuickBooks connection works. Back on the overview page, below the top summary, there are several tabs. The first tab shows a history of sync actions that have run for this QuickBooks connection. Every time a booking is created or updated in OwnerRez, a background service automatically updates QuickBooks to create or update a corresponding invoice on the QuickBooks side. Each of those sync actions is recorded here for you to review later. Next to the sync actions, there are tabs for property settings, surcharge settings, deposit settings, and tax settings. These tabs dictate how the invoices will be created on the QuickBooks side. Let's drill into the Property Settings tab. We see a list of all the properties in this OwnerRez account, whether those should be included in this QuickBooks connection, and what the corresponding class, location, or currency should be on invoices for these properties. If you don't want to use classes, locations, or currencies, you can turn those options off at the top. The Classes drop-down shows all the classes from your QuickBooks account based on what you've created in QuickBooks. To add or change these classes, you'll need to use the Refresh References button at the top after making the changes manually in QuickBooks first. Let's demonstrate using the Refresh References button. I'll click it and a small window will open. I'll click the Refresh Now button and OwnerRez will immediately communicate with QuickBooks to download all of the latest classes, locations, currencies, product or service items, bank accounts, and other entities that we'll use to configure this QuickBooks connection. Now back to the properties. Here I'll select a few to include, assign them some classes, and save. Back out on the overview page, we now see that those same properties are active for this QuickBooks account, and they are configured to use classes when creating QuickBooks invoices. Surcharge settings are similar. Let's take a look at that tab. By default, all surcharges will use the same product or service item when creating QuickBooks invoices. However, you can select to use a different product or service item for each surcharge, and OwnerRez will show a list of all your surcharges with a list of items next to each to map. As with classes, these products or services are downloaded from your QuickBooks account. To update them, make changes in QuickBooks, and then use the Refresh References button at the top to re-download them from OwnerRez, which will update this drop-down list. Then we have deposit settings. As with properties and surcharges, your deposit settings can be configured to use one setting for everything or be split up into different ones. In this case, the different settings are for payment types. Selecting multiple will list all the payment types in OwnerRez and give you a bank account that you can map to each one. By default, OwnerRez uses the undeposited funds account from QuickBooks. Lastly, let's look at tax settings. Like everything else, tax settings can be the same for all taxes or different for each type of tax. We'll select multiple settings and all our taxes will be shown along with the same list of product or service items. You will select the product or service item that corresponds with each tax. After you've configured these settings, OwnerRez will create QuickBooks invoices in the future based on these classes, product or service items, bank accounts, and so on. When you change bookings, OwnerRez will change the corresponding invoice on the QuickBooks side to match these settings.